Oh, just an FYI, I have to go mobile, depending on how long the meeting is, at like 6:50 to about 7:20. But I'll be on the call.
Okay, the sound's working, but we're missing some members. I don't know if anyone has Latrice and or Elaine's number. Do we even have quorum?
No, I think we have 6. Oh, here's Denia.
Oh, Denia. Do you think, is Jose able to join? Thank you, thank you, Daniel, if you could do that.
Oh, here's Latrice. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So I'll call to order. Are you good for streaming, Sarah? Okay. So I'll call our special meeting to order at 6:01.
Okay, I'll do a roll call, and if you see anyone that's missing come in, please let me know at any time. Ms. Bowman?
Here.
Boyd?
Here.
Bugs? Okay, Serna Prado? Not here. Cresswell?
Here.
Hernandez?
Sorry, present.
Okay, thank you. Hillbrands, he texted me that he likely cannot come. Ma is here. Martinsek.
Here.
I see you, Ellen.
Oh, I said here. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
okay, I'm sorry. Let me turn
Okay.
my MacArthur.
Here.
Menjivar.
Present.
Okay, Powers is not here. Zen.
Here.
Okay. So we have 9. Thank you.
I have lost track of the raise hand in my new Google Meet, but I was wondering if it would be okay to just like revisit our norms as a group before we start with the agenda and everything. Would that be okay?
Yep, that's fine. Should we just do approval of agenda first?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll do that, and then you can do norms before public participation.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I can second. Bowman.
Okay, Bowman seconded. Okay, Bowman,
Yay.
Boyd,
Yay.
Bugs is not here. Serna Prado's not here. Cresswell,
Here. I mean, yay.
Hernandez.
Yay.
Okay, Ma is yay. Martinsek,
Yay.
MacArthur,
Yay.
Menjivar,
Yay.
Zen.
Yay.
And the agenda was approved. Thank you.
Okay, Ellen, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, for sure. So I just wanted to revisit the norms that Kim and I had drafted and introduced at our last meeting. So just a reminder, as we're discussing the whole school safety plan, to monitor our own airtime. So just being aware, if somebody else hasn't spoken in a little while, maybe like reflect on that, invite them to participate, and like wait in between speaking if you're able to. Also like using I statements. So I will try to model that myself, but just making sure that you're speaking for yourself and taking ownership of your thoughts. And then also, we're going to assume positive intention and shared goals here. I think especially in a safety discussion, like our goals are very much around keeping our students safe in all of these different areas, right? Physical and mental and social emotional safety. And so just making sure that like we are assuming the positive intent that everybody who's here and having this discussion is for that, right? Like we're all moving in that direction and we all want that common goal. So if we have disagreements, it's not a personal disagreement, it's a disagreement with an idea. And we're looking for solutions to achieve our goals of safety. And then finally, sometimes it's gonna happen. We're gonna unintentionally say or do things that have a negative impact on each other. So practicing a little bit of that oops, ouch language when that occurs. So you can oops yourself when you realize that you said something that definitely did not come across in a way that did no harm. And then also practicing saying ouch when you experience like somebody else's oops that impacts you. So I think that covers it, Kim. Did I miss anything? Okay, thank you so much for giving the time for this because I think it's really helpful for us to like interact with each other and then also any public participation speakers to be aware of like our goals as we interact with each other.
Thanks, Ellen. So our first item is next item is public participation. We don't have anyone signed up right now. And so I'll check again before the end. So I think the sort of the structure of the night, we don't have it more detailed on the agenda, but we could have whoever wishes to speak from the whole school safety committee, Mr. Mitchell, Rachel, it looks like Daniel and Ms. Lalagan are here also. Oh God, there's no hand anymore. Oh, speaking of ouch, that's a giant ouch. Thank you, Google. So yeah, I think we can have that sort of the committee report, and then we can discuss as a council what we want to do next. And then if we have some motions for each motion, we can also have some debate before, between the motion and the vote, we can have some debate. So that's sort of the structure, I think, of the night. So from the safety committee, do you have a document that you want me to share, or I think you guys should be able to share yourselves as well. So just let me know if you'd rather have me do that. And yeah, so safety committee, take it away. I'll have you guys share your own little area.
Thank you, Kazi. Rachel, since I'm at home, I think I can present the plan or the slides. We have a brief slideshow presentation that will kind of speak to what we had planned to present to you all. I guess I'm hoping that if you have clarifying questions, we'll ask those during the presentation, but any, more questions that require a little more debate and discussion, if we could table those to the end of the presentation, I think that would be, great. So I just want to preface it by saying that. So give me a minute to figure out how to present. Here we go. All righty. Can everyone see my presentation? And because I'm looking at it, I can't see thumbs up. So
Yes.
Yes, but it's at the end.
yes, that I can fix. All righty. So this is our whole school safety plan. These are our priorities and suggestions. What we did was we, first of all, there are 3 other committee members here present that I wanted to make sure are recognized. Daniel Arande, one of our students, Ms. Cindy Lalagan, teacher rep, and obviously Rachel Zinn, LSC member. But there were a couple other people who were part of this process as well. And we've been getting input from the counseling department, although, and the security team, although there's no one present for the presentation this evening. So as a committee, as I mentioned, we're composed of several stakeholders, and we've been tasked to do 2 things. it's been kind of conflated into one, but we've really been tasked to two separate things. So first, we were tasked with reimagining safety and creating a whole safety plan that encompasses physical safety, emotional safety, and relational trust. In addition, we are tasked with a recommendation on the school resource officer program. So do we keep 0, do we keep 1, or do we keep both SROs? And the part that kind of gets conflated is in that SRO decision-making, the funds that could be obtained for trading in an SRO could be applied to the plan. But I do, like I said, want to make note that the plan had to be created regardless. And I think it's in our best interest as a school to have this plan in place. But for you all as an LSC is to try to make that decision on, from a budgetary standpoint, where we could actually pull those monies to make the plan come to fruition. So with that being said, what we are presenting tonight is a draft. It's not our finalized plan, but there are definitely elements that we need a little more information on, but we're sharing what we all have agreed upon, which is the following: a mission and vision, our safety priorities, what is currently in place at school, and what additional strategies or interventions that we are considering. To get to our mission and vision, we actually had some data that had been compiled and that we've been reviewing that have influenced our decision. So I'm gonna pause for a moment, and Rachel, would this be the time you want to jump in to speak a little bit about the data that we've collected and discussed?
Definitely. And I think the next slide, I put it in the wrong spot, but I have a kind of a summary slide. There we go. Thanks. So we've been looking at a lot of data as a committee. There was a student safety survey that was sent out a week and a half ago, a parent safety survey that was distributed, and then the teaching staff also distributed a survey. And I believe there's a non-teaching staff survey that's being conducted as well. Okay, great. And so this is a really, surface level kind of look at what students, teachers, and parents are saying about the SRO in particular, the SRO program in particular. But I've linked in the folder that I shared this morning a lot more data that goes into detail and gives you more qualitative analysis as well on what people in the Jones School community have told us about what school safety means to them. But I just kind of wanted to highlight there are differences here between different stakeholders. So there's about 82% of students who responded no to the question, do you need a school resource officer to feel safe at Jones? 52.9% of teachers said that they would like 0 SROs to be retained at Jones. And then the parent safety survey, 57.4% of parents, I know we can all read, but I think it's just important to voice all of this. 57.4% of parents responded that they believe that their child needs a SRO at school to feel safe. And there's differences there, so I just wanted to call attention to those. But in the qualitative analysis, I wanted to speak to some of the things that kept coming up, and one of those was kind of a conflation of the the SRO program and the Jones security team, or on the other hand, parents and students indicating that if an SRO or both SROs are removed, then adding a security officer or adding other supports related to physical safety would be desired. That did come up frequently, and there's a Excel spreadsheet that kind of summarizes the topics that parents brought up and students brought up in that qualitative, like the open-ended responses. I can share that in a second, but I wanted to just kind of bring that in. And then a little bit more about the data that we looked at. I brought this up at the last meeting that we had, but I think it's important. I also linked in that folder a deck of slides that goes over the frequency and type of crime in the 1st District and 911 response times, just because I think that something I saw in the qualitative analysis was discussing where Jones is located. And I just wanted to bring that data in. I pulled some data from the Chicago Police Department. also some data on 911 response time so we can get a better understanding of the type of crime that's being reported in and around the Jones community, and then the frequency. And I was looking at data from 2018 and 2019, so it's not the most recent, but just to have we can have an educated conversation about what sort of crime we're talking about. And I think that's a lot, but maybe that's a good place to start. And I'll link the qualitative Excel spreadsheet now.
I apologize. I'm having some technical difficulties. So I'm on my phone, but I obviously probably have lost the ability to present. So I apologize.
I can share the slides if you want.
Yeah, how about you share those slides, Rachel? That would be great. And then when you get a chance, can you put a link to the other set of slides that you mentioned in the chat?
Sure, let me do that now. So
Yeah, I was
I'm
gonna
just
say, if
gonna-
it's easier for me to share so you can still navigate stuff, I can do that. Oh, if I have the slides.
I can share the slide deck with you, Sarah. And I also should say that we as a committee looked at a variety of reports that were external to the Jones School community. And Daniel also, you received some reports that a parent shared with us. And then, so we were looking at a number of things, but all of those reports that we looked at are in that folder. So I didn't want to like overwhelm the chat with links, but that's all there. If you have questions about the like particular reports, I think we could answer them. But Sarah, did you get the slide deck? Okay.
Great, can you see them? Okay, let me know if anything looks crazy.
So maybe the priorities slide, maybe that's the one to go to. Yeah, that one.
It actually go back to the mission. We didn't actually get to state that because we jumped ahead. So as Rachel mentioned, the data that we've been collecting and the additional resources that have been provided to us have helped us shape kind of the first component that we were asked to do, which is develop a mission and vision statement, which reads as followed. At Jones College Prep, we aspire towards a vision of school safety that makes all students in the building feel safe. We will work collaboratively with all stakeholders to foster an environment that utilizes restorative practices and proactive approaches to safety. Our goal is that all students feel welcome, supported, and respected by both their peers and adults in the building so that they can reach their full potential. So that is what's driving us. And so after this mission and vision, we kind of assess what's currently in the building. And by assessing, we really just had a kind of a conversation. What are some of the things that we think are our strengths and areas of growth? And those things can be referred to when you review the template that we provided you all. Those are listed there. But after we had that discussion, we got to what are we prioritizing? Keeping in mind this new vision of safety, meaning one that is more than just physical, safety. And so we developed the 4 priorities. So if you can go to, I guess, 2 slides down. These were the 4 priorities that we have developed. One, and this isn't in terms of, they're not listed in terms of importance. So it wasn't that this is because this is number 1, this is our number 1 priority. They're all, important. But making sure that all students feel connected with staff and peers, making sure all students feel physically safe in the building or in school, to make sure students have access to social emotional supports, and to make sure that we're providing mental health supports to students. So the whole school safety plan required us to come up with these priorities, and then we had some rich conversation about what do we have as a school that exists in place right now that address these priorities. And then we were tasked with, well, what additional things would we want to have in place? And that encompassed our plan. The last piece would be what would be the budgetary impact. So if we put these things in place, these additional things, I should say, what would be the value or cost of those things? So that's where our work and our research has been in. So if you go to the next slide. So here's priority one. And from left to right are the existing strategies or things that we're currently in place as it relates to making sure that students feel connected to staff and peers. And then the next set are our strategies or what we're suggesting. And then a recommendation and the cost that would come with it. So as it says, some of our current strategies are that all students on campus are assigned a school counselor and an ACT Lab teacher. So they have an advisory teacher. We also have available to address the connectedness, our Eagle League, and then our Jones mentoring program, which is an adult outside of counseling that would provide academic supports to students. As far as some new strategies, we were looking at utilizing our partnership with EOS, Equal Opportunity Schools, which has some data already established that mentions through the survey, some students have already people as trusted adults. And so utilizing that data and figuring out a plan for those students who may not have completed the survey or who we don't know who those trusted adults are, but that would be, you know, part of the plan. But we have a starting point. And so we definitely want to use some of the things that we have at our disposal. Secondly, is the development of school-wide relationship building lessons. Obviously, we don't have that curriculum on hand. There's some place to get that information provided. And so as the section mentions, some of these activities could be provided by a group like Emoja. Got a kind of relative quote from them. And so I got some raw numbers of some of the services that they offer. And that's what you see in the far right. There's more, and I want to say a PDF that says Emoja at Jones was uploaded to the safety data file, so you guys can reflect on that and see some of the other things that are offered. And that also goes into the third point about sharing SEL activities among staff. So trying to provide a space and opportunity for staff who may have had some successful lessons that they've tried, an opportunity to share with each other. And to build that level of camaraderie. So those are three strategies that we came up with. And like I said, there's a dollar amount tied to one of the services. Next slide. Okay. Making sure all students feel physically safe at school. So currently, as it mentions, we do have an inside-outside approach to physical safety. Our security team works in concert with the SROs, security out, and the SROs protect outside in. And currently, our SROs also provide additional support as it relates to entry warning, so like checking IDs. We do have a metal detector, and so what happens is students will come in the building, these, and CPS provides us like a random number every day, and whatever that random number is, every, say, fifth kid would go through the metal detector. And so the security team actually conducts, you know, the searching of property and whatnot. But that happens in the morning. Over 100 cameras security system that covers most of the campus and helps us view what's happening and who's moving around. And currently, what we are suggesting is perhaps 1 to 2 additional security team members. And in addition to a team member, there's a couple of areas of the building from a physicality standpoint that could be vulnerable. And so looking at how to better address that. And I gave an example, a specific example. If you're familiar with the building, in between the students have to go outside between the two buildings. There's a glass structure and glass doors. That's the emergency exit. And on the backside towards the alley, there's like a steel emergency gate. And we would be looking at adding an extension to that gate, because as it stands currently, it is pretty easily something that someone can get over. So but what I just found out, when you read the bottom of the template, the estimate amount here would come from a capital fund, so it doesn't necessarily have to be built into this plan. The desire to have it can be put in the plan, but the cost is not something that we would have to factor. So I do want to make note of that. So that $5,000 estimate, you can kind of remove from your the overall expenses. Okay. Slide number 3, or the third priority. This is in regards to the social emotional supports. What we have currently in place, our SEL supports are broken down through academic, social emotional, and behavioral. And so ACLAB is a space and opportunity for academic supports to occur. We do have some peer-to-peer tutoring opportunities, whether it's National Honor Society. We do have some other clubs that do some peer-to-peer tutoring. Again, our mentoring program that was mentioned previously is another, opportunity for some academic student supports. Social emotionally related, Eagle Lab is a space where there are opportunities to provide social emotional supports, whether it's through curriculum, lessons, and things of that nature. And our Eagle leaders, and additionally our counselors, are available for that social emotional supports. And then the last piece, from a behavioral standpoint, any restorative approaches that we're taking to discipline. And so one of the examples I listed here was the peer conferencing program. New strategy, or something that we are suggesting, and this is based off of data and recommendations from other entities, was to have a dedicated staff position that focuses on social emotional support. This position would work with school administration in the implementation of a system of school-wide supports for students. And so we've done some research on the kind of position the kinds of positions that are available. I know the Equity Committee recommended a director of students services, or student engagement, I should say. And there's only one person that has that title in the district, and there's a hefty dollar amount to that. And so we had conversation about where else we could have the need for this person, but perhaps a title that could be a little more cost effective. And so in the district, there is one person who actually holds a title of restorative justice coordinator. There are 48 current district school or positions with the title of school culture climate coordinator, and about 22 positions that have the title of SEL specialist. And the range that you see on the far right there is the minimal salary for the culture and climate coordinator, and that 92 grand is I think that was that was the culture and climate coordinator. The SEL specialist was like 97, and that's not counting benefits. So just wanted to give you guys a range. And any director position was higher costing, because I didn't get the exact details, but my assumption is because it's considered more of an administrative position. And so I think the criteria or credentials that are needed to hold that are a little more advanced. Like, I'm assuming that this person would need to have some sort of general administrative degree or certification, type 75 or 92 or whatever they call it now. So that's priority 3. Next one. So what's this fourth priority in terms of making sure that we have mental health supports for students? What we currently have is, our counselors are the bulk of that right now. And only one counselor actually has that mental health licensure, but we are looking at, but they all have the ability to refer. And in conversation with the counseling department, what they've done is they have vetted, some different mental health resources, and when there's that need to refer students, they have an array. So there's some that are on a sliding scale, so it's not just like one location where what if you don't have insurance, like they have a bunch of different resources to provide. So that's what's existing. What we're looking at is we want to make sure that we have the development of a behavioral health team. So that would be an internal thing that wouldn't cost any money. Where there could be a potential cost is in time. And so we would want to recommend some level of stipend. And that's what we're trying to do a little research to find out what would be a reasonable amount to have as a stipend or for the work that they would potentially be doing. And more importantly, establishing a community partnership with a mental health provider. So again, kind of working with the counselors. What we're envisioning is having someone in-house. The last conversation I had with Mr. Coleman today was some level of programming where a clinician, a mental health clinician would maybe come to the school once or twice a week and be able to provide services for students on site. So that's what we're looking at. And again, don't have a dollar amount for that, but that, definitely looking in that realm. So those are our four, priorities. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we're tasked with two things. So what we just shared with you was the plan, and this would be the recommendations, regardless. But what about the SROs? So as of June 9th, the committee as a whole, at least those who have been present, have been vacillating between the decision of not retaining them at all or retaining one. Much of the data that we had, the small samplings of student, teacher, and parent data, is leaning towards the zero in respect to what the students have asked. I can be 100% honest. We don't have as much data to indicate the one. I think the one is coming more so out of, I don't want to say fear, but reservation. Everyone in the committee agrees 100% that we don't need to. But in conversation and looking at where the concerns are, and most of the parent and even student concerns as it relates to safety is the commuting, like the to and from outside of the building. And as a committee, we talked about some ways in which we might be able to address that. But none of us felt that we needed two SROs. The one SRO represents a sense of comfort and stability for some for at least the next year. I think also the fear of if we get rid of this program, there will not be another opportunity to change our mind and get it back. So scaling it back slowly but surely was some of the discussion. And I would at this time take a moment and let any other committee member speak if they want to on this point or anything else. So Ms. Logan or Daniel, Rachel, do you guys have any additional comments as it relates to that?
Yeah, I'll add something real quick. So like Mr. Mitchell was saying, no one in the committee really was thinking about two, but I'll speak for myself. At first, I was more leaning towards one, just because of that hesitancy that Mr. Mitchell was mentioning, and as one, but as a contingency, like if we get rid of one this year and then we work on that plan with those additional funds, and then if the plan works well and it doesn't blow up in our faces, then we remove the other one. So as Mr. Mitchell was talking about that slowly but surely phase, but as I was going through more of the recommendations that we recommended earlier, a lot of them go past that 50,000 budget, so that was persuading me towards zero more. But yeah.
Anyone else wanted to comment at this time? Rachel, did you want to add something?
I didn't know if Ms. Logan wanted to, but I kind of wanted to say something that Ms. Logan said, if that's okay, just because she brought it up twice in two separate meetings, which is that speaking to that like kind of gradual phase out approach, we've just, somewhat still emerging from the pandemic, and mental health supports are going to be probably like the most needed in this upcoming year. And so if it's a matter of moving money around, I think Ms. Logan was just saying, this is from what my teacher's perspective, I am speaking for Ms. Logan, I'm sorry, but this is what I'm witnessing amongst students. And so I just wanted to uplift that because this is a whole conversation on one hand about like safety for sure, but then on the other side of it, there's actually like, mental health crisis, I would say. I don't think that's like too extreme or dramatic to say. And so, how can we best address that? And we have an opportunity to, so Just wanted to bring that up.
And just one more point to add, I had shared this with Rachel, and I'm not sure if I said it in the committee meeting yesterday as well, but again, speaking to the idea of mental health and addressing that, and also in line with our mission statement that we just mentioned, a more proactive approach. If we spent some of our resources in addressing mental health issues on the front end, we may not have to worry about someone becoming unstable and maybe doing something to harm others, on the back end, where that's the concern and fear for having the SROs in place, and anyway. So again, we had rich discussion about what an SRO is, generally speaking, what an SRO has meant at Jones, and even the experiences of SROs, like what people have expressed, what some data has shown hasn't necessarily been the experience from a majority, at Jones. And so when we look at cost effectiveness and what we need and what the students need, and if we're going to be true to this overall plan of safety, those resources could be, utilized in a different way. I think that if we were to move in that direction totally and completely, we'd have to make sure that we have some other things in place. So one of the things that we talked about in the committee to share it with you all was reaching out to CPS Safety and Security. So Jadine Chow, the first district commander, and the aldermen, and pressing them on the area, that is most utilized by Jones students, and heightening presence, so that areas that we're concerned in terms of getting from Jones to the train stations, bus stations, the metro, those kinds of things are better addressed. So yeah, we talked about that. And again, having that additional security team member, I will put that out there that with looking into September, it's probably guaranteed that we'll still keep some level of entry plan that we have going on right now in terms of health screeners and the like. If we're going to reinstitute things like the metal detection and things of that nature, we need more hands on deck. So the extra security team member is actually a necessity, not a desire. We have 9 from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. But that bulk, like in the morning, where we would be, bringing in people, and where there's so much action happening, to have an additional pair of eyes to ensure everyone's safety would definitely, be on the smarter end of things, especially if we're going to remove, a resource officer. So just wanted to add that. I'm sorry, can we go to the second to last slide? So our next steps as a whole safety committee is we want to gather feedback, comments, suggestions from this meeting and make adjustments to the plan so we can finalize it. We're going to schedule a committee meeting for either Monday or Tuesday or next week, and then send that final version to you all. And then, I couldn't tell you the date right now. I'd wait till we met as a group, but obviously sometime next week, present you with, here's our final, version, and let you guys, do what you guys have to do. So that was our thoughts in terms of next steps. And the last slide just says questions, comments, and concerns. So that's kind of now opening the floor for the discussion.
Thanks.
I know that Elaine,
Rachel.
sorry. I know that Elaine had some questions in the chat.
Yeah. So Elaine, do you want to ask them? Do you want me to just ask them? You can go ahead if you'd like. I'll field some of those. Oh, okay.
Good evening. I was trying to get off mute. I don't mind you reading them, but I just wanted to say that the first 2 questions were related to the first priority. Let me pull them up. Sometimes, Cassie, you do a lot better with seeing the screens. Give me a moment. So I
No
can
worries.
go back to the chat. It takes me a minute.
I can also bring them up again.
And
You want to read them. The first 2 are for priority 1. You can read them for me. Thank you.
So the questions were, the first question that Elaine asked was, have you assessed the impact of the existing strategies? And then the second question was, What accountability measures are in place to ensure that existing strategies are implemented and effective?
So, no, not a formal assessment in terms of the impact of the existing strategies. And I mean, that bleeds into your next point in terms of the accountability measures. I think that is the part that we have to reimagine and have an honest conversation with ourselves from a leadership standpoint in terms of that implementation. I know we have a planning meeting scheduled in mid-July for next year. And one of the things we're definitely going to make sure that we do in this meeting is kind of look at each segment of things that are going on in the building, have a more clear, defined plan, and part of that plan would include accountability measures. So that's what I can tell you down the road. So if you're asking for the current, and the answer is there's not a solid accountability measures in place.
Okay, thank you so much, Rachel, for reading, and Dr. Mitchell for your response, your honest response. I say that because I know that there are things that are on paper that's, hey, we have this, we're doing this. But what I continue to notice is that there is not a through line from your data to professional learning to your actual professional practice and student impact. So I just wanted to put that out there because as I was listening to this and looking at the presentation, I just noticed like some of these things, like they have that, it doesn't always get to the student level. So even though you may have that in place, I think it's important to clearly specify what the expectations are for people who are in their role, so they'll know that, hey, these are the expectations, this is tied to this goal, and this is what we expect you to do as it relates to student outreach, student contacts, because I don't know that there is a lot of outreach. It's like we have it, but when someone is struggling, I'll just speak from a specific experience from a parent who has shared with me, and this is a senior parent. So they have had 4 years. The outreach wasn't there. So the student is in need, but that did not occur. So I think that it's important to kind of look at that and have regular check-ins to see, are you reaching out to students? Because that was my third question. How do you know, are you checking on students? Especially when we've had this pandemic for over 1.5 years, their kids have been struggling, but I don't know if there has been any outreach. And I'm not saying anything about counselors because I don't know if they've been expected to do it. But if you're going to list it, a strategy, kind of making the connection of, hey, this is what we'd like for you all to do. This is the frequency. This is how we collect the data to see the impact. But I just, really wanted you guys to think about student impact. Thank you.
Thank you for elaborating on those points. And I'll leave it at that as a thank you, because there are some, examples, the question to follow up in terms of well-being checks or checking in, yes, but not the formalized way that you're referencing, where like I can tell you twice a month counselors do this and this. Like it's not to that level, but I can tell you that there's definitely well-being checks and supports for students. That's another part of like that mentoring, the additional mentorship program. Ellen, would you agree? Like that. That's kind of where.
I just want to say this. When I say this too, I'm talking about I have a student there. So if we don't see it, I want to say I respect everyone on this call. I respect everyone's contribution. And I want to say that I've sat in just about every seat as a student, as a teacher, as an assistant principal, as a community member. So when I say this, know that I love and appreciate and honor everyone and what you do. So I don't take it lightly, but I just need to reveal and say, when I say something, because I'm probably not seeing it, and it's not something that's getting to the level of my student. And then when I notice, like I might have the experience, but then when I have other parents, like they'll reach out to me and, with concerns or sharing like, hey, what do you think about this response, this email? And so then I know that, hey, that's not just the experience that I have as a parent or my child has as a student. There are other people having these experiences. And then I also want to note that, are you looking at how the experiences may vary for students? Because it's just so happened that I am of African descent and those parents are as well, and so it's like, what is going on that You have wonderful things listed, and I'm not saying that people aren't doing it, but what there's a gap there. And so I want to say that I don't know that that's occurred with my own student. I don't always say anything because I know everyone is trying their best. But when there are a lot of times I sit in these meetings, I'm like, what? They do what? A mentor? Do you have that? Like, you know, one adult for each, who is that person for you? You know, because I don't see it, and I'll just adjust for my child. But when other parents say it, that's when I bring it to you all. When it's like, when you have a quorum of parents saying, hey, this is a concern, will you please bring it to the floor so we can come up with a solution. So I didn't mean to talk so long, but that actually touched my heart. And it was a bit of an ouch, not that it was intentional, but that's not the experience that we have. And sometimes you reach out and people don't respond and you have to circle back. So I'm just concerned about how kids are feeling when people don't reach out and they're struggling, and you see it connected to your attendance and other things. And there's some kids that just have not had that reach out, even though it's on the paper that they have not everyone. So I'll stop. Thank you for obliging me as I went on a little soapbox. Pardon.
Thanks, Elaine. Ellen, I think you're on Stack, and just a reminder to people to put Stack in the chat since I don't have a hand to see, so we're just kind of improvising this evening. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Elaine, for bringing up those concerns. And I definitely agree that the accountability pieces are needed. We need to have like some more clear procedures and structures. I wanted to just speak briefly about the mentor program because it was mentioned for a couple of these priorities as an existing structure. So I kind of just want to again clarify the scope of this program. There are 25 students who are served by this program. So it's a very small program. It's run by me. I teach full time. I do not have a period off. At the beginning of the program, when I was first setting procedures into place, I did have the period off to kind of like hit the ground running and develop the program. But in an ongoing fashion, as I coordinate the program, I do not. And so there are limitations associated with that. It's a very small program. The teachers who are mentors are volunteering to do so in addition to their teaching load. So they have a release from Eagle Lab, which again is one of those existing support structures that Mr. Mitchell had mentioned. So there is like a little bit of a break on that in order to mentor. I know Ms. Bowman was a mentor and can probably speak to like the level of time and emotional energy commitment associated with that. So I wanted to kind of bring that up, that it's very small and also done at this point completely on a voluntary basis, which means that it's not expandable at this point, right? This is not a sustainable structure that can be expanded to embrace more students, although I absolutely see the need there. So I think, again, I can only really speak to that experience, but I wanted to mention that because I think while I appreciate the fact that it exists at our school, and I think it can serve a purpose, it is really very limited in its scope. So I wanted to just bring that up. There's something else I was going to say and I completely forgot it. I apologize. But if there's any questions about the mentor program specifically, I am definitely the person to ask about them. And we're working on developing more clear procedures for the mentor program specifically. Like I've been in partnership with Mr. Coleman trying to figure out the connection between the academic supports that the mentor program provides and the social emotional supports that counseling has the training and experience to provide. So that's definitely something that's like a work in progress that we are putting together like in our little corner of this SEL structure.
Thanks, Ellen. So I think if we have any more clarifying questions on what's been presented, this would be a good time to ask them. Sarah, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just have a few things from the YouTube chat that I want to make sure that get asked. One was a question about the budget for the limit for the safety plan. And I had just put in the chat that if we do not renew the SROs, that we would get $50,000 for each position, for each SRO. But as far as an overall budget, we don't have that. Like it's not in the, that doesn't mean 100,000 is our limit. You know, we could definitely, as a council, work with the administration to see what we could do for that. So the answer to Sydney is we're not sure, I guess. Lots of comments, good comments about saying mental health is very crucial. One attendee had a question: is there any information about the SRO history at Jones? For example, what incidents may have happened in the past where the SRO have been needed? I don't know if anyone on this call can answer that. Rachel?
I think I can answer part of it. I think Daniel can probably answer if you'd like the other piece. So one thing to note is that if the SRO program is maintained, I should say, Jones will be getting 2 new SROs, and so individuals who have not been in the building before. There was I think there's data about these officers that's public information. I don't know if we can talk about that if we'd like, but I think Daniel, do you want to speak to your experience with, because I know that you have more information on this from a student's perspective.
So yeah, to Rachel's point real quick, I did my own research on these 2 officers because it is public data. And so I just found on one officer, he was named in the new SROs, because the school year we did get 2 new SROs. One of the officers was named in a lawsuit in the city, and like the city had to pay. I forgot what amount, and I think it was improper search and seizure. But yeah, so that's out there. But regarding SROs, what they do currently do at Jones, I see after school a lot of times they do help students cross from, I forgot what street, but they help students cross the street a lot of times. And also one useful thing is that with their walkie-talkies, their speakers, they can contact other like CPD, and I think that has come in handy before. There's been like soft lockdowns at Jones because there was a robbery nearby that we've had like big police activity around the school, so they've gotten help through that. During the Van Dyke trial, when there were like suspected riots, there was a lot of police officers like surrounding the school. That I would think that our SROs would call that for help. But like I'm not administration, so I don't interact with SROs on a daily, so I don't know exactly what they do, but those are a few instances where I know that they have come in handy.
Okay, I have another question. Thank you, Daniel. This question is, I may have missed this, but did you say that the aldermen or other community resources were possible to increase safety going to and from the CTA? Did anyone mention that?
Yes, Mr. Mitchell did, and I don't know if you want to speak to it now that you're back on, Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, what I said was, we would be in discussion with safety, security, and the first district commander to see what can be done, and mentioning the alderman, because the issue isn't the safety in the building, but in the community. And if it's a community issue, then that's something that the alderman should be a part of in terms of that conversation and about what can be done to support it. So that was an avenue that we were looking into.
Thank you, and that's all. I just had one student comment that said they're a junior, they haven't heard of any mentoring program outside of Eagle Leaders and a counseling department. There's definitely a disconnect reaching some students, but I think that, Ellen, you answered that question when you made your comment. Daniel?
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit on to what Mr. Mitchell was talking about SROs. Originally, I was thinking of retaining one SRO for that purpose, for their ability to talk with CPD, because they do have those walkie-talkies I was talking about, so they can call. They have immediate backup, and so SROs weren't necessarily. In a lot of the surveying we were doing in student forums, we were communicating this to students that what the difference is of SROs, and one main difference was that their ability to go beyond school grounds, into the red line and like around to like the neighboring restaurants and stuff like that, because we are around a lot of restaurants, so they have the ability to go out there, and which our security cards don't at the moment. So that's why I was like thinking of keeping one because they can go beyond that, and that is a big thing that like is an issue with the safety around it. But when Mr. Mitchell was talking about those alternatives of contacting the alderman or having CPD have extra patrol around there, because there is already patrol on like the red line and stuff like in the mornings.
Okay, I think next on stack is Roberto.
Hey, everyone, sound check. Thanks. So on this topic, I have a few questions. What are the daily duties of the SROs? Daniel, you mentioned certain scenarios. They seem very specific scenarios, but I'm trying to understand, what do they do throughout the day and where are they? So that's my first question. The second question is, you brought up, Daniel, you mentioned, and I think this was I think Mr. Mitchell and Dr. Powers had mentioned this before, is that the SROs can go beyond the school. What does that mean? What are the SROs' authority beyond the school? Because if they're there to provide safety in the vicinity, if they're running out to Grant Park or running down to Harold Washington, like what? I guess I'm having a hard time understanding what their authority is beyond the school. Now, if they're walking around the campus, that's something different. But if they're running across the street, how is that different than the school noticing that and just calling the Chicago Police Department to arrive? And I believe the police station is nearby. I don't know how many miles, but I think it's nearby. I think the last LSC mentioned that it's nearby. I really don't know how far it is, but so like those are two questions that I have: is what are their daily duties during the SROs? And I think at the town hall meeting, Mr. Mitchell said that they're there from 7:30 to like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and then what are the SRO's authority beyond the school wall? Are they running down to the red line? Are they running over to the Harold Washington Library? So those are my two questions quickly.
Can I answer those quickly? Okay, I apologize because since I'm mobile, I can't put my name in the chat. So the school resource officers that are assigned to the school is their first priority. So they don't necessarily just run off into action, if something's happening at Grant Park. In those instances where they were engaged in things in the community, it was directly related to how whatever was happening impacted the school. So for example, before the pandemic, there was a robbery that occurred less than a block away from the school right around the time of dismissal. So the SRO was available and, reacted. And it wasn't necessarily to go and deal with the criminal element, but looking at where our kids were in relationship to what was happening and trying to, divert the children and making sure that they weren't going to be impacted by whatever police business that was actually happening. Okay. And same thing with the incident. Again, we had students who were off campus coming from graduation rehearsal. And so in that commute from the practice location back to the school was the reason why the school resource officer reacted to what was happening in the community. But typically their main responsibility is school first and foremost. And their hours were it was really like 7:30 to 3:30. Any other community involvement would be, again, connected to the school. So if they were, say, addressing something across the street, it was because it was during lunch period and we have students who are off campus. So again, what they were connected to is always tied to what's happening with the students. And as far as their day-to-day actions, it really stemmed from, as I said in the beginning of one of the slides, is they assisted with entry in the morning. So, monitoring, making sure that the right people are coming in the building, and doing perimeter checks during the course of the day. Working with, I said, in concert with the security team, making sure that the doors are secured and that people who shouldn't be in the building are in the building. And in a perfect world with our previous SROs, they were also building community with the students, and in those spaces. So they didn't walk around the building all times of day. They weren't up and down the hallways, harassing students or trying to make them feel nervous or intimidated. They had an office space with a CPD computer that at one time was able to do reports and things if needed. And then depending on what's happening in the city, sometimes they were called off of their responsibility as resource officers for the day and dealt with other issues. But the idea of them coming and going during the course of the day is not 100% accurate. And if I gave that impression in the previous meeting, I apologize. Because when they were there in the building, they were there in the building. As Daniel has mentioned and as it's been stated, we do have 2 new resource officers. One was in the building maybe 3 months before the pandemic, and the other one was up there about a week before the pandemic. And so, we were in a phase of getting to know who they were as individuals and seeing how they could be incorporated and a part of the Jones community. So that's where we were, with that group of SROs.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And I apologize. I did not intend to make it sound like their priority isn't the school, but there's just a discussion about like the SROs can go beyond the school perimeter. So I just needed to understand like what does that look like and what does that mean. So I was in no way trying to suggest that that the SROs
no problem.
running
I
around.
didn't take it as that. I was just re-explaining. So thank you for that clarification.
And so I just have 2 more questions, if I may. I guess if we don't have the SRO, or if we have one, it doesn't mean the police will ignore the school. So let's assume, right? Well, let me just ask that. If we say 0 SROs, is Chicago Police Department going to basically say, well, you guys said no to us, we will never come by your school ever again? Like, what is there, I'm assuming that there will be assigned officers or check-ins with the school if there isn't an SRO in the building. So that's my first question. And then my next question is, what is Rachel, you mentioned this earlier about the Chicago Police Department's data. If you can just give a high-level overview of what that looks like for the area in the Jones School community.
Sure, I can answer that. The reason why I put together those slides was just because I think something that comes up a lot in conversations about school safety is active shooter situations. And while I respect and want to make sure I definitely see the weight of that argument or that perspective, the reality is that the area that Jones is in has some of the lowest instances of shootings in Chicago. And so I just want to be, pulling from data that, and so in that slide deck that I shared, it's just showing that's not a concern for Jones in the way that it's actually shooting is like a very real part of a lot of Chicagoan stories. So and then the crime, the types of crime that are occurring around the Jones School community have to do with robbery and burglary and theft, things of this nature. And so I just wanted to put that out there. But then also the response times for 911 responses is about 5 minutes, which is a little bit lower than the average across the city of Chicago. So I included that response time there as well. And so, yeah, 90% of the property crimes are in the first district. So not seeing the like violent crimes, I guess, is why I included that.
If I could jump in real quick, the last thing that I wanted to say in regards to what the SROs do on a daily basis, Jones used to be the mission, and so there are a lot of homeless and a lot of people with mental health issues that still circulate around the school, community, and we on a daily basis we see our fair share of individuals who suffer from some level of mental illness, and SROs were helpful in the mornings for staff who park outside, kind of moving them along so that when staff come in, they don't have to deal with them. And secondly, like in the middle of the day, someone's busy talking to themselves in front of the building and whatnot, having that presence has been, helpful. Security does do that, but that is not necessarily in their job description, and that's a concern, for those who are engaged in that work. So I just want to add that, like, that's the other piece that the SROs assist with when we speak about kind of outside the building, support.
Madam Chair, may I be recognized? After the
Yes.
next question?
Let me see who's next. I think Kim is next.
Sorry, Elena, I'll keep it brief. I just had one comment and a question. One, I feel real triggered because I was in the lobby during that robbery when we had to rush all the seniors in. And so there might not be a lot of violent crime and a lot of shootings outside the school, but my biggest fear as a teacher is as someone coming into the building, and 5 minutes to me seems like too long. So sorry, I'm just a little triggered because that moment was probably the scariest moment I've had in my 16-year career, trying to rush seniors in a building and hide them in an auditorium because we weren't aware of what was going on. So sorry, I don't get emotional often, but I've lost students to gun violence. So it's a triggering, it's trauma for me as a teacher. And then my second question was about data. I was just curious of when the student and community data was collected, because it was less than 10% of our student body and our staff body. And to me, that's not really representative of a voice if it's less than 10% of the data. Is that the same data that was asked over the summer, a year and a half ago, or was that newly collected data? That was, I'm all about the numbers, so.
I don't know. I want to just thank you for sharing that. And I just wanted to, I appreciate that perspective because it's a tricky balance, right? I totally feel the weight of that. I actually don't totally feel the weight of it because I've never experienced that. But thank you for sharing it. I also wanted to say, with respect to data, it's not representative at all of the school community by no means. That's something that has to be acknowledged. But I also want to say something that did come up a lot was the presence of a gun in the building is traumatic for some students. And SROs do carry a gun. They are fully armed, uniformed officers. So you have this alongside the gun presence, the firearm. So something that I just wanted to say really quickly was that, and this has come up in our conversations as a committee, the resources that are being used to fund the school resource officer program right now are for instances and situations, and there are active instances and situations that are not necessarily being addressed in the building right now as it relates to mental health. And this is the part of the conversation that's really difficult because it's which mental health concern do you address, and which position do you fund? Which one's going to be the most effective? And I don't think there's a clear answer to that, but I just wanted to lift that up again as we talk about statistics and data around crime and shootings and things of this nature. What's actually also happening in the building currently that students have told us, even in the limited number that we have of respondents, and what have they asked for? And I think the student, if I just plug the student safety forum really quickly, that did come up. The number one topic was mental health and needing mental health supports. And again, really small sample size, but we're seeing it across data sets, parents, teachers, and students, that mental health isn't a primary concern.
Okay, I think Rachel, you were on staff, but do you want to let Elaine go? Go ahead, Elaine.
Okay, so Kim, thanks for sharing that. I'm so sorry. I know how terrifying those things can be in the school. I'm sorry that happened. My response was more of, I had a question about just how Jones administration is working with the school and CPS school safety and security team and those resources. I asked because when I was a principal, I did not have an SRO, but I also served at a school where I did have one. So I've seen both. And so I know from my personal experience that they have CAPS and the CPD and CPS and Mars, they work very well together. If you request a special attention, you just have to go to the meetings or just talk to them. They will have a car out there or a presence at arrival, at dismissal, at other times. And in addition to that, Jadine has a team, and they're a good team. They're very responsive. When you come up with your plan and you need something, and I worked on the west side of Chicago, very dangerous, where people were shot regularly and died. And so that was very important that I have a good safety plan. And the police officer, even though I didn't have an SRO, the police officer and Jadine's team, oh my goodness, they were very supportive. So I'm just wondering if you leverage any of those resources. So if the vote goes where you don't have an SRO, please know that the CPD is very responsive and cooperative in partnering with school and Jadine as well and her team. They're very helpful. You just have to establish those relationships and let them know what your trouble spots are. And that was something that I just did at the beginning of the year, and they gave full support. And thankfully, at least those school years, we didn't have any loss of life or shooting. Prayerfully, we were lucky that year. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. So I think we could maybe kind of wrap up this stage of discussion. And I think the sort of the next thing to figure out is what we can vote on tonight, and what we would like to get more information from either the safety committee or the administration or our own research. So I think we can sort of divide these things. I mean, like the safety plan should, it's obviously tied together, how many SROs you have and what your safety plan can contain, both because the financial resources for it and what you're focusing on will vary. But I think it makes sense that it's possible to vote on both parts and vote at our own on our own schedule as well. Yeah, so Rich, if you can do some more topics that we want to cover, that will work. Mr. Mitchell, did you have a comment on this part?
Yeah, I did want to add that the funding for the plan could also come from those ADF funds. I know that's one-time federal funding, but there may be some things that were recommended. So, for example, some of the program for Emoji was did. That's almost from the suggestion. That's almost $19,000, but that would be like a one-time thing. Whereas some of the position recommendations could be something that would better utilize the trade-in value for the SROs. I just wanted to put that out there as, from a budgetary standpoint, where certain funding could happen in order to address the potential deficit from everything that was asked for the plan.
Yeah, another source of funds in addition to those ADF funds are these OST, which is out of school time. They can pay for after school programs. And I know, for example, Alternatives has a sort of combined after school program where they it's sort of kind of group counseling stuff. And then they can also refer you to individual counseling services that I think they run themselves in-house at Alternatives. So that's another thing that could be funded. And those OST dollars, I think, will be for 2 years as well. So yeah, there's other additional sources that we can be thinking of, because I think there's definitely more than $100,000 worth of stuff that was on that list. Roberto had a question about the teacher survey. Do you want to ask that, Roberto?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I would like to invite either Ellen or Kim just to quickly present on that teacher survey so we can have a a full picture here.
Absolutely, I can speak to that. Give me 1 second. I know I have so many things open right now. I can also share a screen with the installs, unless somebody else has it up right in front of them. So many things.
Can I also add something real quick about surveys as well? The survey for parents that went out as well with some information that has been translated into Mandarin as of now, and we distributed that. So we'll see if that can reach anyone. And also, I think Rachel's in the process of getting it translated into Spanish.
The survey and the presentation from the safety town hall all got translated. And we actually are getting the video of the town hall translated into Spanish, not into Mandarin, because that was a little out of the budget. But yeah, so all of that's going to go out, and I'm looking forward to having that even more data to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing the screen. I found it, but it took a minute. So I think Rachel had already shared the statistics for the first question, which is about SRO retention. So we have 68 responses. We have 115 staff members who are on the list. So response rate is over 50%, but not like 99%. And so as Rachel had mentioned, you can see in blue the number of staff members who would like to retain 0 SROs, red is 1, and then the orange is 2 SROs. So it looks like it's mirroring what the whole school safety committee had mentioned in terms of their vacillation, but more data supporting the 0 SROs. And then on the next slide, this in conversation with Mr. Mitchell after he hosted the staff Q&A session about whole school safety, which was, I guess, last Wednesday afternoon. He had brought up some of the ideas that had come up already from the whole school safety committee in terms of alternative places for that funding to go if SROs are removed from Jones, again, either one or both. So this is like in partnership with Mr. Mitchell, trying to make sure that we're covering the different aspects of whole school safety. So the top 2 items, additional security team member and security cameras, address physical safety. And then there are several items that address mental health and social emotional learning. And then the responses at the bottom, the lowest, the 5 at the bottom are like others. So there's an opportunity for respondents to fill in their own. So in terms of the data here, we requested that staff members choose up to 3 areas that they would like to prioritize for resource allocation. Again, at that point, we had no like budget numbers in terms of how much each of these might cost. But this is kind of like how it shakes out. And it looks like when I was looking at the survey earlier, the top 4 responses all correspond to new positions. So the top response was a mental health crisis manager, like type support position, then restorative justice or restorative practices coordinator, and social emotional learning coordinator, and then also a security team member. So it seems as though a lot of the teacher respondents were selecting additional personnel, while there are also training options provided on the survey, and you can see what those are here. So I don't know, Roberta, if that helped kind of just like briefly summarize some of this data. If you have other questions though, let me know.
No, it does. Thank you so much, Ellen.
And while this is up, again, thank you so much, Sarah. Are there any other questions about the teacher survey? We can try to answer those.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, so I think this is a good time for, if you have thoughts about the timing on these things and our work as an LSC, our plan as an LSC. This is the sort of the first time that CPS has come up with this idea. So it's not like, I mean, I think we all know how central office works in CPS, and it's there's a lot of issues. So, I think thinking about what LSC's responsibility is in terms of budget and that sort of oversight, and this SRO vote has been given to LSEs now. This is the third year in a row. And so that is, I think, should frame our discussion about this. Sarah?
So I guess my question is, do we, like strategically, do we want to, what Mr. Mitchell said, outside of SRO vote, the plan can be revisited each year. Okay. Do we want to, as a council, vote 0, 1, 2 for the SROs, and then as a separate conversation, give recommendations based on the draft of the whole school safety plan that we've seen? Is that what we're trying to do?
I think that makes sense. And I think it makes the most sense in figuring out what the plan is. And yeah.
Right, I don't want to start giving, talking about the details of the whole school safety plan without kind of maybe finishing this part, so then we can move forward. Because I do have other comments, but I don't think now is the right spot. So if someone wants me to make a motion, I'm happy to make a motion. If someone else would like to make the motion, if we're there, let me know.
I think it's fine. Yeah, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Okay, well,
and we can do a little debate after the motion as well. Roberto has one more clarifying question. Go ahead, Roberto.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that the school or the whole safety committee has been in contact with the Chicago Police Department. I want to make sure that how we vote, whether we retain 1, 2, or none, that CPD will still be something that Ms. Bugs mentioned. The CPD will still be there for the school community. I just want to make sure that that communication it's clear that they're going to be there.
I'll take a second to address that. Thank you, Mr. Menjivar. The comment.
Mr. Mitchell, we
I've
just
talked
lost
through,
sound.
Jaden Chow, and she isn't. Can you hear me now? Okay. What I was saying is I personally have not talked to the district commandant or commander, but through Jadine, I've had conversations about what to expect. And if we were to make this decision, one of the things that she said to me directly was that we could sit down, like the three of us, and determine what else could be done. So no, we wouldn't be abandoned. It would probably work very similar to what Ms. Buzz was suggesting. We do have a good commander in the first district in terms of that relationship building and access. So if Chief Chow suggested that can work, I trust her because and her experiences in working with different police commanders, she has a good sense of those that will follow through what they say they're going to do and others that don't. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure that the community was aware that we're not going to be abandoned, that there are other support services in place in partnerships with the Chicago Police Department. And it sounds like Jadine has that relationship, and it would just be a matter of having that conversation with her.
Thanks, Roberto. Sarah, did you want to make a motion?
I can make a motion, and then someone can second it, and then we can open the floor to more discussion if we want, or we can do roll call. So that's how this will work. So I make a motion that Jones College Prep removes its SRO program. Do you have a second?
I second the motion.
No, floor is open for discussion if needed.
Can you just repeat the motion again? Sorry.
Yes, I said I made a motion that Jones College Prep removes its SRO program.
Thank you.
So do we have people who want to speak to either side of that? Go ahead, Rachel.
So I really appreciate, Kim, your comment about the limited data set that we're working with. And I just wanted to say that is the data that we have. And so for me as a member of the committee and as a member of the council, that's what I'm kind of trying to base my understanding of, like, how to see this issue from. It's not like for me, it's not a personal, thing. It's like, what has been said in this like limited setting, the data that we've collected, what have parents said, what have teachers said, and what conversations have I had with, Mr. Mitchell, for example. And so all of that is kind of going in. That's why there's like that big folder with all that data in it, even though it is limited in terms of how many people we reached. That we did talk to some people. Not this is not happening in a vacuum, I guess. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Anyone else have comments? Jose?
Yes. So basically, the reason I moved to second motion is because CPS has a reputation of not really filtering the SROs. And that is evidenced by the replacement of the current SROs right now. And also, I'm aware of the same situation basically at a couple of different schools in my area. So that's one thing. The other point too, that I have not heard anything about is the city gang database. So my understanding is that any policeman can just write down a name, a student doesn't obey him, and that police officer is able to just write down the name of the student and just include them in the database. Anytime into the future that person, that student is stopped by the police department, any officer at any place in the city, that student is basically treated as a gang member. This database is very secretive. Quite a few different groups have requested more openness and transparency into this, and CPD just refuses to open up or even remove the gang database. So that to me it's a very serious point, especially for the brown and black students at Jones and at any other school in the city of Chicago. So those are my 2 points. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Violet?
Yeah, I'm not gonna turn my camera on. I hope I'm not lagging as much. I'm not like super in strong Wi-Fi. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my decision on what I'm gonna be voting on. I'm looking at the data, and I'm also definitely looking at the June listening sessions that were held at Jones College Prep. And aside from the data and aside from what's been happening at Jones, particularly that has been stated over and over again by marginalized youth, I am also speaking and voting on through my experience, similar to what Jose said. But just to be clear, like, I come from a family of addiction. I come from a family that has struggled with their mental health. I come from a family that has been negatively impacted by gang violence, and I wholeheartedly believe that the response to that is not more armed officers, but more support in mental health services. And that's where I'm coming from with that. I have, very similar to Ms. Bowman's comments earlier, which like I wholeheartedly empathize with. I've also, witnessed my own students be arrested in front of me in a classroom of 40 plus Black and brown students. And I don't want that happening in any other community. And if I can prevent that from happening at Jones within any capacity and within any power that I might have right now, I will be doing that. I still have students that come up to me to talk about that day that they saw their best friend arrested within my own classroom, and to the point where I didn't know how to respond because of my own trauma in dealing with CPD. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Violet. Anyone else on stack here for comments? Kim?
All right, I keep putting my last name because I'm just like in teacher mode. But I just wanted to thank Violet for sharing her thoughts and Rachel for sharing hers. And then also just kind of clue into like how I'll be voting. I'm not going to be voting on my personal belief at all. I'm going to be voting based off the teacher voice. So Ellen and I are going to be voting in response to the numbers that we collected, and just it might not be a reflection of like what I want to do personally. It's that we represent the teaching staff, and that's how we have to vote.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone else? Roberto?
I just want to give other folks an opportunity, invite them to join the conversation. I know it's taken a lot of airtime, so.
Do we have anyone else who wants to chime in? I'll say a few words. I think the data from the surveys is important. It's not a huge number compared to the school community, but I think we've had lots of input from the school community over the last year, even before I was on the LLC, the school community was speaking. There's also a whole area of data that is much broader than Jones. It's broader than even CPS. And it really says that the impact of having police officers in schools is not, it does not necessarily make schools safer. And in fact, it makes it less safe for Black and Brown students, for special education students. And that research data, I think, is something that we really have to think about. The fact that right now at Jones, we have 9 security officers, we have 2 SROs, and we don't have a full-time social worker. And that's really where counseling happens in CPS, is that you have social worker minutes, and you kind of only get those if you have a 504 plan or you have an IEP, and they're really regularly available to you. And that's, really says something about the priorities of mental health, and also that overall aspect of safety and security, which is how our students feel in the building. And I think that has come through over and over again in different modes. And so that's really what is pushing my viewpoint. And if you really look at, in terms of physical safety, the data on that, the report that Rachel linked to, I looked into as well. And in the loop, the majority of crimes are property crimes. And really in terms of physical safety, the loop is one of the safer places in the city if you're talking about the risk of physical attacks. And I just really feel, in addition, that to use our resources as a school to patrol the neighborhood, and where that isn't what our school budget should be responsible for. And that's something that is on the city. And we should be holding this city, talking to our aldermen and talking to our city leaders if we think that the area around the building isn't safe for our students. But that isn't something that should be coming out of the dollars that we can use to support the needs of the student body. So that's my little spiel on that. If anyone else has any more spiels, just wave your hand or put your name in the stack. Otherwise, I think we could move to a vote.
So Kathy, I appreciate that. I do want to say the way I'm moving forward. I think that the data that we have, just to Ms. Bowman's point about thinking about the Jones School community, I think the data helps me understand where the needs are. And that's in the social, emotional, the mental health, wellness check-ins. And we can no longer put that burden on students advocating for themselves. And that's, I understand we're trying to build them to be growing adults and responsible and respectful and wonderful citizens of this city and this country. But we have to understand that it is hard for children, it's hard for students, for youth, right, to advocate for themselves. And I think that we need an individual that is advocating for them, that is checking in with them, that's creating school-wide policies and practices to uplift their voices and make sure that we're making decisions that are based on their voices. They're in the school, right? And understanding where our teachers and our staff are coming from, because they're all at the school. And I think the data does show that a big priority here is that social, emotional, mental wellness. And I think Dr. Powers has mentioned before that this money for the SROs could go to that program, to that position. So in my mind, this is what I've been thinking about. It's like, how can we use those resources to have a positive impact on students?
Thanks, Roberto. Yeah, so Rachel asked to have the motion written in the chat. So yes, a yes vote is to remove the SRO program, and a no vote is to not remove the SRO program. Yeah, so then if the motion fails, then you have a different motion that we vote on next.
Okay, so if we're ready, I'll take a roll call as long as everyone understands what their vote means. Is everyone good? Okay. Bowman.
Yay.
Boyd.
Yay.
Bugs.
Yes.
Thank you. Serna Prado.
Yay.
Cresswell.
Yes.
Hernandez.
Yay.
Ma, yay. Martinsek.
Quick clarification that I am voting on behalf of the teacher survey results, and because the motion is effectively 0 or 2, I'm going to abstain, just to clarify.
Okay, sorry. MacArthur.
Abstain.
Menjivar.
Yay.
Okay. And did I say me already? I'm sorry, me. Yay. And Zen.
Yay.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're yays, 2 abstains. So the motion carries.
Thanks, Sarah. So the next thing I think to discuss, oops, Ellen. Okay, that was like Denai SSX, sorry. Thanks. Go ahead, Denai.
Sorry, I know the motion already passed. I should have said this before, but I think it's also really important to remember that Jones isn't in this SRO battle alone, and that we can help to set precedents with the way that we handle our SROs. And I think that what Cassie was saying about it not being Jones's job or Jones's budget's job to patrol what goes on around the school is the city's job, just kind of speaks to the fact that this is a wider systemic issue. And that when Jones removes its SROs, and that when Jones implements more effective ways and less dangerous ways, in terms of student emotional support, to handle things at Jones, then those things can spill up, and those things can influence other schools and just generally make the system better, rather than Jones being able to get our SROs and just let other schools just kind of flounder and not be able to find the same resources that we're able to find as such a privileged school.
Thanks, Denai. Yeah, that's a huge point. And I think we're thinking about, even in terms of what's happening outside the building, in terms of who, what the problems we're seeing are and what solutions are that don't involve armed law enforcement agents. Yeah, so I think that the next thing to discuss is the safety plan steps. I think one of the reasons we talked about doing this vote soon is so that this safety plan planning and how it ties in with the other funds that we should be getting allocated and figuring out where they go. It can all sort of be woven in together. And so I think that it is important to get this started. So yeah, maybe we should even like bring up the template or something and look at that. Do you want to do that, Sarah?
The latest one, right, Rachel? The one you shared, like, okay, let me find that copy.
I just shared it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me just present it.
Thanks, Sarah.
I wasn't sure. You already did the vision statement. Is there a certain section you would like to go to, Rachel?
I mean, I think what we would love some feedback on is aligning the priorities with the recommendation and specifically the budget. So we have numbers there and they are estimates, but Mr. Mitchell did a lot of work compiling some numbers that we can have so we can know where we're trying to aim in terms of budget. So it is roughly $140,000, and that really depends on the position that ultimately is chosen, positions potentially. But then any aspects of the plan that I mean, I think I don't want to speak for anyone else in the committee, especially not Mr. Mitchell, but because you were the one that put a lot of work into this. There's aspects of that we could tweak or we could leave as is, but that's kind of, we're presenting this now to get feedback on it.
One little thing that I was going to bring up before is that CPS, I think the reason, so they have positions listed as youth intervention specialists. A lot of those are actually restorative justice coordinators. When they added a bunch of restorative justice coordinators, because that was a thing that you could select after the resolution of the strike as a school, they did not have that restorative justice coordinator position to add. So I don't really know what percentage of youth intervention specialists are actually the RJ coordinators or not, but basically at some point they're going to make an official title for restorative justice coordinators, and a bunch of those youth intervention specialists that are listed like that will be listed as restorative justice coordinators. So yeah, it's kind of just a factor in what the position titles are right now.
Kathy, I can pull that data tomorrow to at least give a salary range and make that adjustment if you want that number as well. I didn't look at the salary range for that position, but can definitely add that in there as another data point.
Yeah, and I don't know whether like traditional youth intervention specialists are going to be different than these new restorative justice coordinators, but I'm sure someone could answer that in central office.
Did you want to go by priority and kind of drive it that way, Rachel or Mr. Mitchell, where it has the numbers in the column, and then, you know, if we as a council wanted to say, like, you know, add X or think about adding X in the next meeting.
I guess I would think that that's fine, because we presented to you some of the suggestions that we had for each priority. If you have additional suggestions or, you know, recommendations, so, you know, like we had listed 1 or 2 security team members. If you disagree with that for whatever reason, or if you think definitely just 1, so you want to clarify that, that would be fine. So yeah, that's what we're looking at now for right now, with any additional feedback that you all might have. So if you have additional recommendations, I know there was a big push for a dedicated staff person. So we made sure that it is included in the plan, but there would need to be further discussion on, you know, the roles and responsibilities of that person. But I don't know that I feel like that's a conversation a little bit later. What need to be determined is that we want to have that position in place, and here's the salary range that we'd be looking at for that person.
Ellen?
Yeah, for sure. So if we're going by priority, I wanted to like elevate what Elaine was asking about earlier about assessing the impact of current, like existing strategies, and then also like looking for maybe specifics about accountability measures, both for existing structures and then also for the proposed new tools. I think that without kind of like that framework, I think it will be a little bit challenging to implement new strategies, and also to see how they can intersect with what we already have in place. So I wanted to bring back those questions that Elaine had earlier. And I guess maybe this is an ask for the whole school safety committee to maybe draft what those could look like.
Oh, did Kim disappear already? Bye, Kim.
Bye.
Thank you. Let's hear. Sarah, do you want to go?
Yeah, I guess to that point too, and I had in some of my notes is, I would think that this would be like a strategic plan for social emotional learning that would come from the top. I don't know, Mr. Mitchell, I see you put stack. Do you have some comments on that?
Well, yeah, I guess some of the comments, like what Ellen just said in terms of or reiterating or lifting up what Elaine said in terms of the accountability measures. I agree 100% those things need to be discussed and apart, but I don't know if that needs to be laid out in the plan right now. I think it's a subpart. I feel like that's the details that need to be, you know, discussed within the plan, but I don't know that needs to be a part of the plan that is being, I guess, approved. If we know that, like, we want to add this person, and we know that the structures and things need to be put in play, there needs to be discussion about that, and it needs to be documented somewhere. But I just don't know if that plan that we're submitting right now is the place to place it. You know, it definitely needs to be discussed. It definitely needs to be laid out. But I'm wondering if this is the place where it has to be placed. I feel like, or it's just my understanding that this plan that we're submitting is more so for kind of the budgetary element, that like we're requiring or we're looking into these pieces and we need this from the district, and then once that gets approved or not from the district, then we can get into the level of conversation that we're talking about now. At least that's my understanding. You know, so to spend a little time, you know, naming those things to put in this right now, I don't know that we need to do.
I think Jose is next.
So another thing, would it be a good idea, or I just want to put this on the table, where we have 9 security officers at the school. Jones is not a trouble school, and yet we have 9 security officers. We don't have as many at my local high school, and there's issues there with security. There's issues with gangs. There's issues with all kinds of social and emotional issues all the time at school. So would it be smart or a good idea to maybe replace a couple of those security people for somewhere more specialized in any of the areas that have come up in this discussion?
Can I take a moment to address that?
Sure.
Thank you for your suggestion, Jose. There are 9 security team members, not because of Jones being a troubled school or anything like that. Part of it is due to our location, but it has more so to do with the opening and closing of the building. The fact that we're open from as early as 6 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. And so to have some level of security coverage requires 9 team members. We never have 9 at one particular time. So we might have 1 at 6 o'clock in the morning, maybe 2 by 7, and at the height where, where we have the most kids and, we're at full capacity, we might have as many as 6 at one point in time. But by the end of the close of the evening, we're down to 2 after 5. And we have events and things in the evening, so much so that we may have a sporting event or something else where we have to get additional security to be there for those kinds of things. And by additional, I mean someone who works in the day may come back, and work a couple of hours. So 9 is actually, it's not a sufficient number, which is why it was put in the plan for that additional ones, particularly if we were to get rid of the SROs, because now we need additional hands in the morning to support our comings and goings of the students, and in light of again what those particular security officers do on a daily basis. So I just wanted to give you a little more clarity around that. And it's funny, I actually had this conversation with the safety manager today in regards to the request for 1 additional. For everything that you just mentioned, there are some other schools that have more pertinent issues and do more with, I won't say do more with less, but have less security team members. But yeah, 9 is not actually sufficient for the level of safety that we're looking for at Jones.
Thank you for that information.
Oh, sorry, Jose.
Sorry.
Ellen was going to go ahead. I think Rachel.
Yeah, because it is directly related to what Mr. Mitchell was saying, I just wanted to clarify, because I believe the SROs you had mentioned are at the school from 7:30 to 4. So I'm not sure that the absence of SROs affects the evening commitments. I could be wrong. I understand that that is still like an ongoing concern, right? Like that 9 total members is not the same as 9 simultaneously present. But I did want to clarify that. Is that accurate, Mr. Mitchell? And then I had one more question.
Yeah, that is accurate. The SRO time frame would be 7 to 4. But like I said, yes. So to clarify that question, yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, because I thought I heard you say that earlier, but I didn't write it down. And then my second question is related to the entry procedures. So one thing that I really enjoy when I come into the building is when Dr. Powers is in the lobby of the main building, like welcoming students in. And I'm wondering if we can think about entry procedures as more of a community building as well as safety process. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily like whose role that would end up being, but I do personally find that I think that's a great way for him to connect with students and like be a visible presence, like, hi, I'm the principal, but I'm relatable, I'm right here. So I guess I was wondering if there's a way to rethink entry procedures that are less like external, I don't know, it's just that are different. I'm not entirely sure what that looks like because I just started to think about it this evening, but it's something I kind of wanted to bring up.
Absolutely. Actually, Ellen, prior to the pandemic, that was the kind of the norm. You're right. Dr. Powers would be there in the morning greeting people, and in the afternoons, I actually, would be with the kids for the same reason, just another touch point. I position myself, leave out the front, go down State Street, and kind of assist at the intersection at Harrison, and I would do that in concert with the SRO, so they got to see both of our presence and engage the students in conversation. How was your day? That kind of thing. So the idea of building community, that has been, part of what we've done. But to your point, making it, I guess, it something definitely more structured, and that everyone knows that happens. Because I don't know if you knew that I was outside every day, rain or shine. Yep, been doing that for 6 years now. So, because that's something from a leadership standpoint, I always thought was important, to be able to interact and like, in the morning, see people when they check in, their mindset, and in the afternoon, being able to kind of check out with them. So that's an informal thing that school leadership has been doing for a while. But to your point, we'll make it much more structured.
Thanks, Mr. Mitchell. To Sarah's question in the chat, it does look like we have moved on to priority 2. Maybe we should backtrack just a little bit and see, is there anything else anyone want to bring up for priority 1 that should be included in there, or are we feeling pretty good about that and we've moved on to priority 2 because we are?
Point of clarification. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Is there anyone ahead of me? I'm sorry, you guys. I don't know.
Nope, you're good.
Okay, so when I saw it, I'm wondering to what degree does it include the student's voice in terms of like what they need and what they would like to see, and how that is folded into what we will venture to do to address their specific needs.
And Elena, are you saying that about the whole plan?
Priority. Well, I always go to students. So, I would want to know that for everything, because, but the concern is when you come up with things and if the stakeholder voice isn't present, then you can come up with a plan, but it may not have the impact that you're looking for. So you want to make sure that students are weighing in to say, listen, these are your priorities. These are what our needs are, and that's reflected in the plan, so that we can monitor that, and also make sure that we are listening and responding to what they say they need, because what a student need, it might be different from what we think they need or want.
Rachel, do you want to speak to that? I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak, and I think this applies to the priorities. This isn't, I just want to go back to the accountability piece, because I know that it's not explicitly asked for in this template from CPS. Like, how are you going to, ensure that this is actually applied? But that doesn't mean that we don't have to or shouldn't exclude it. And I know that we kind of in the chat talked about it's a commitment to creating an SEL strategic plan. But can we scaffold that in the document? We don't have to go into robust detail, but I just don't want that to be one of those things, especially just thinking back to Elaine, your point earlier about making sure it's connecting with students and that this is something that people are actually getting to utilize. Especially if we're gonna, I think it's actually an efficient way to do it, because we're gonna have to review this plan in a year's time anyways. And so it's, building it out from the get-go of how are we going to make sure in a year from now that we've actually met these things that we wanted to meet. How are we going to assess ourselves? I wanted to say, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think one kind of weird thing about it from an LSC perspective is that this should be grounded in like the school improvement plan, right? And it should be tied to those goals. And then it will make more sense in terms of like what we can do to evaluate whether it's happening and getting updates on it. And there's a structure for that. So I think that would be important, that these priorities are like reflected in the school improvement plan. And yeah, I mean, that doesn't necessarily solve the student voice aspect, since we only have one student on the LSC, but it's definitely another aspect of this. And we have been, in terms of a commitment to an overall SEL plan, I think there was a commitment made to provide us with a plan like that several months ago. So I think we need to have that plan delivered to us, and hopefully it will reflect the work of the whole school safety committee when it is, because those things should be really tightly integrated. Yeah. So I think, I guess let's kind of see if people have anything else to add to priority 1 or other words on priority 2. This is the time for those.
Hey, Cassie.
Yeah, I think Roberta or maybe Sarah was supposed to go actually, but do you want? Okay, go ahead, Roberta.
So for priority 1, I would just like to emphasize and just encourage having this dedicated position. I think the equity committee is, and the students have been, and we've been talking about, and the administration talking about having a position that is focused on advocating for students, that would surface students' problems, that would coordinate a variety of all of these points that we have made today. From, I think, Ellen, you mentioned the mentor program, right? And that you have to take time. That's on a voluntary basis, right? You're volunteering for that. You have 25 students who are in that mentoring program, about 25 students. So having a position, a dedicated position that can coordinate and say, Ellen, what do you need? How can we support you? How can we connect you with the counseling department? And then reaching out to the various departments. And that's their sole focus, right? That's their responsibility. That's what their salary, what their position would include, what their salary would be, right? Is to ensure that students, that we're surfacing student problems, advocating for them, amplifying their voices, and then just surveying the entire school to make sure that we have a consistent policy and practice in place. I think that is important. And I think students have said in the past that professional development is important. Right? And so I know that Jones has invested in the Davis Square program, and they're completing six PD sessions, 6 or 8 PD sessions, right? So, but that has to continue, right? Whether it's 6 or 8 again, but there has to be some additional PD so it becomes a part of the school environment. Students are required to take X number of English classes, X number of math classes, X number of science classes over the course of the 4 years. And I think that should also apply for when we're talking about anti-racism, anti-bias, equity work, that professional development has to be there every year.
Thanks, Roberto. Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I have 2 comments. One is about the priority 2. So Mr. Mitchell just mentioned that they're needing more coverage. And I guess my concern is, can it be something besides a security team member that can provide this coverage? For example, if we have rush periods in the morning or the afternoons when we're coming in and out, is there something that we're not thinking about where a position could be doing that, but also then repurposed for something else besides security? Maybe something else that we need. Maybe that's the restorative justice person has that, and they could be one of those people. that's helping getting kids in and out of the building. The other thought was, does the school have any student-centered groups that would be like student government or something that would be interested in helping people get in and out of the building more securely? Or additionally, do we need to just look at those procedures and say, is there a more efficient way we can do this? And so, and that's something like that we don't have to do tonight, but it's just questions that I'm asking the whole school safety committee to consider. And then my second comment is my biggest concern with this whole process is this is just the beginning. And Mr. Mitchell mentioned that they plan to meet in mid-July to put a plan together, and that's making me a little bit nervous. I feel and see the commitment from Mr. Mitchell to this process. What I don't see is the commitment from our head leader at the school to make this a priority. And for example, we have asked for the SEL program strategic plan for a while. And although there are many great things happening at Jones with respect to social emotional learning, what we're missing is where it's all tied together. And that's really what I think. I'm just nervous that there's a lot of great ideas, but I don't see anything that ties it all together. And I respectfully will say, and I hope it's not an ouchie to some people, that I think it's just due to a complete lack of leadership at the highest level.
I will say ouch to that because I'm a part of that leadership that you're referring to. And I know you tried to exclude me, but we're still a team. And I hear and I receive everything that you're saying, but I do want to acknowledge that ouch.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Mr. Mitchell. Elaine, do you have a comment?
Yes. So I agree with what has been stated by Sarah and Roberto. Basically, you guys, we need a strategic plan. And in your plan, and you as well, Cassie, everything should connect. Shouldn't be all these misfires all over the place without connection. You have to start with data. And with that, it should tie in what has been expressed with the equity, with the SEL, with the safety in your overall plan. That's where you hit all of those. That's where you have action points. That's where you have your milestone, your progress monitoring, your accountability. That's a part of strategic planning. And it should comprise all of these things that we're saying, that we're mentioning here. I just also wanted to state that I did have we called it a dean, it was a student advocate, okay? And so that student advocate worked alongside with our dean, but dealt more with the social emotional things, with the restorative justice and with that team. So when you work at schools not like Jones, you don't have SRO, you don't have money, you don't have resources. So you have to be effective and creative because literally people can die. And I'm not exaggerating. And so with my team, I had one dean and I had the student advocate. And although his primary responsibility was about that, like that culture, like some people call it dean of culture, he also, when I had my safety plan, he was a part of that. And my one security guard. And, then I got red jackets. I talked to JD. We came up with a plan. But if you have there should be a safety plan. There should be a supervision schedule. And so that's Sarah kind of mentioned that, where you are covered with perimeter checks during the day, all of these different things, and you make sure that you are focusing on that. I want to reiterate the importance of supporting students. There are some positions out there on the budget that were mentioned that they make over 6 figures, but they're not directly related to supporting students. So I think that we need to consider that, and perhaps the mentality or the mindset is more of shifting from police and security to students and supports. That's all I'm gonna say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Elaine. Ellen, did I miss any other stacks above? I don't think so. Go ahead, Ellen.
I just wanted to clarify because I think I am personally conflating a few things right now. So I believe that the July discussion that Mr. Mitchell is referring to, that's like a leadership team retreat, I think that he had mentioned to the PPLC, which is obviously like intersects with the whole school safety committee, but my understanding is next week the whole school safety committee is meeting, and I assume also will be additional meetings like in an ongoing fashion. So, okay, I just wanted to clarify because I was getting a little bit confused. So July is specifically administrative team next week, and then probably also beyond will be a whole school safety committee. Okay, thank you. It's just that.
Yeah, so in terms of the LSC, we need to have our organizational meeting for the coming school year between July 1st and July 14th. Right now it's on the calendar for July 13th. And so we can kind of keep that in mind as well. I think Sarah's making a face that says maybe that's not correct. So we can set that. It's not really officially part of our regular meetings for this school year because June was the last one of those. So in terms of when we'll revisit this, I assume the next step, if we don't really have I don't think we can do a vote on this plan tonight, so we'll do a vote at the next meeting, unless we have an organizational meeting and then a regular meeting in July. Yeah, so I think we're kind of covering a little bit of 3 since that's about the position, and I think it is really hard in terms of tying all these together since we don't have the best context to put it on in terms of a school improvement plan or an existing social emotional supports plan. One document that I will share in the chat is, I'll try, essentially something similar to what the Emoja document is, only it's from Alternatives, and so it's some of the programs from there too. And I'm not sure if it actually talks about their after school program in that, but I think that is something that might fit into priority 4, where it's provides some additional mental health resources. And I think we should also be talking about, for the ADF funds, those really are intended to help, children recover from the pandemic and what is like the most immediate things that people need right now. And so I think thinking about whether some of that could be really thoughtfully directed towards SEL and mental health is something that should be under discussion. And I presume that the LSC is going to vote on how to allocate those dollars, so we need some information. And so I think this is something we may have to express in writing to Dr. Powers so that we can expect the sort of information that we need to be doing those votes. And it seems like those votes should be taking place in July if they're really going to be implemented, given how early the school year starts this year. Yes, so next up, Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, wanted to, I guess, clarify the meeting that the school leadership would be having in July would be to try to connect the dots, as I said it in the stack, because you're no argument in what's been requested and a clarified plan for next steps in all those different areas as it relates to social emotional learning, as it relates to just everything for the school. And so it's mid-July. The reason why we're doing it then is when everyone will be present and we'll have an opportunity to sit and dedicate enough time to get all those pieces into play. So I heard the hesitation, in regards to that. So as one of the school leaders, I wanted to just own, everything that was said, and that that is an area that we're working to clarify and improve in. And I think, what was the last thing? there were a couple things that came out in the conversation. I'll just leave it at that. But I wanted to make sure that the disjointedness of some of the things that are currently in place is duly noted, and we definitely need to kind of reset and set, straighten it all out. And so there needs to be some time to do that. And so just again wanted to acknowledge that.
Thanks, Mr. Mitchell. I think Roberto.
I'm sorry. There was one other thing. I had a question in regards to what next steps that you need from the committee. I hear you guys, you're raising great points, asking great questions for the different priorities. Is the language for the priorities acceptable? Is there something that needs to be shifted there? It sounds like people are on board with, generally speaking, what the priorities are asking for. Ms. Buggs made a great point in terms of making sure that we are a little more student focused. And so is there anything that we could do differently or add that could demonstrate that shift? There's been a lot of conversation around the physical safety element, and it's a little hard to describe. I wish there were one of the security team members who could speak to you all a little more readily about the day-to-day elements, so they could speak even more directly than I can in terms of what their day-to-day looks like and the need for one additional in terms of what they do on a daily basis. So there's that piece. But then, so I wanted to ask that clarifying question so that when we meet, we know as a committee kind of what we need to add to based upon your suggestions.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the thing to do now. I feel like people are pretty happy with the priorities and how they kind of carve things up. And it's more a matter of us making some suggestions on taking and removing things and adding things under the actual resources part, or what that sort of third column over is. Roberto, did you want to mention the one you had for priority 2?
I do. I think it might be important to include some language in priority 2 about meeting with Jadine Chow and her team regarding responses or coordinating with Chicago Police Department, because we've just voted not to retain, right, to remove the SROs. So Mr. Mitchell mentioned that's now the next important step. So if we can include something like that, that would be, I think it will help the community understand that there is an alternative.
Thank you for that suggestion, Mr. Menjivar. I feel like there's there's documentation somewhere that says, like, if a school decides not to retain their plan, that like CPS, Safety Security, will meet with that group to like do those things. I feel like I've seen it in writing somewhere already. And even if it's not in writing somewhere, I can tell you that there's definitely that commitment. I can reach out to Jadine tomorrow to confirm an official meeting time where like that's what we're discussing, and I can give you that date so you guys have that confirmation. I definitely appreciate your concern about that piece, but like it will definitely happen. And so I don't feel like it needs to be put in this portion of the plan. I'm not sure where it would go anyway, but I want to be able to ease your concern about that meeting, and those conversations will definitely occur.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. It's just to make sure that I'm not suggesting in any way that you weren't planning on doing that. I just want to make sure that that's part of this conversation, right? The folks that are watching this through the YouTube, I want to reassure them that we are taking their concerns of their children in the school into account, and that this is the next step that the school will do, is to meet with Jadine, talk to her, and then come back and present what that response would look like. So that's really all I wanted to mention. And then Mr. Mitchell, you mentioned something about like how do we get, and I'm just paraphrasing here, like how do we get student voice, or how do we get, like what's the next step of trying to collect that data? I would make one respectful suggestion, and that would be perhaps meeting with the cultural identity clubs and SGA and the mentor programs and the Eagle leaders to have that discussion of what they think would support them at school as far as like social emotional learning and mental health and wellness. That would be my suggestion.
Ellen, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Well, Roberto just said actually reminded me of something that I do just within my class. But I ask my seniors as they're leaving, and I did not do a great job with it this year, but I did somewhat informally. I ask them like, what would you tell an incoming student at Jones? What do you wish was present at Jones that would have helped make the transition easier? And I feel like I am very lucky to have senior students in AP Physics because they have that perspective of 4 years at Jones, and they're coming from various elementary schools as well. But I guess to piggyback off of what Roberta was just saying, maybe some sort of structure in place, like an exit survey. I'm not sure if that's already in place, if that's happening on a school-wide basis, because I only have like 40 seniors. But I think something along those lines could be a really instrumental way of getting student voice into this conversation.
Ellen, I believe the counselors do some sort of exit questionnaire with the seniors. And I'm sorry for interrupting, but that resonated for me. But I do feel like that's something they've done in years past. It's been an odd year, so I can't say that they've done it this year. And they've also had to review how what they question with students. So I'm not sure if that survey went out this year, but in years past, that has been a part of what counseling does with exiting seniors.
So I had one more comment on priority 2. I mean, looking at the numbers of security guards that are at like Lane, Whitney Young, etc., we have a pretty large amount. I'm assuming that maybe some of that is because we have more rentals than those others. I don't really know what the rental situation is at Whitney Young and Peyton. Lane certainly has a very large physical size and twice as many students. So I don't think that I want to support a plan of adding security team members, and I would definitely support Sarah's ideas about other ways or other positions that could support, especially like the beginning and the end of the day, if that's really when the crunch is. So yeah, I think the thing that will happen is that this, like the whole school safety plan committee will meet one more time, or however many times you need to meet before you bring this back to us again. And I think that our approval of it to whatever that happens is supposed to be by mid-July at the latest. So we should be able to do that at that, whatever the first meeting in July is. So yeah, I mean, I think if people have more stuff tonight to add right now, they should. And I think we can also send Mr. Mitchell and Rachel our other suggestions too. Do you want to go ahead, Jose? Oops, I thought it was an unmuting. Okay. Yeah. I think the thing that I would mention for priority 4 on additional mental health stuff, I like that could be part of an after school program or a community partnership, is definitely something that I'd like to see take place, and maybe some numbers on that are possible. Or even, like, can we get a 1-year social worker position because with our ADF funds, just because there's probably going to be some acute needs above and beyond even what we have already. for the coming school year. And then Ms. Logan has a comment in the chat about the students being trained for peer conferencing with alternatives. And that's a good set of students as well in terms of bringing in student voice. So yeah, I think that's another thing that we'd like to see when this comes back. If there's another round of getting input from students, I think that would be, I mean, to the extent that the school year is ending, that's difficult, but yeah, to whatever way that is possible, I think people, the LSC would appreciate it, it sounds like. Oops, go ahead, Sarah.
So I guess so for the next steps, the whole school safety committee will meet again. They'll kind of hash this out. We're good with the priorities, kind of. And if you're unable to put all the details together, I think that's okay. But I think like really thinking about even listing options like, oh, for this, we could do X, Y, Z, to almost like a brainstorming session in this document to give people options. And then I guess I think I would like to see, to make sure that this doesn't just die. I mean, I know we're supposed to review it annually, but what could we do to make this a part of the CIWP? That's really what I would like to see. Or if we can't do that, make it a special principal evaluation goal that ties this whole school safety plan to a specific goal that we put together for Dr. Powers. Just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Sarah. That was one thing I put in the chat just now. Like for the budget, we have those alternative scenarios, and then we kind of have like column 1, column 2, column 3, and comparing those in different trade-offs. And so, yeah, something like that I think would be helpful because that's essentially the same process that we would want to use for us as well. For this, I think. So I think, go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
To some of the suggestions, can definitely see, trying to tie it into the school improvement plan and everything. I guess I feel like there's a portion that we have to, share with the district for approval, and that's more, again, it's my understanding, that budgetary piece. But I feel like what I'm hearing is taking the same plan and if we, that there needs to be some additional work that needs to be done to address some other concerns. But I feel like that is like once the plan is approved and then like part of the next steps. And I wish I could say unequivocally, like, okay, if you guys vote on these particular options, and then we'll, hash out the accountability pieces that were mentioned earlier today, some of the other suggestions that were mentioned, some of the alternatives. So if we don't, go with an additional security team member, what will some of those other pieces look like that address that first priority? So there definitely needs to be some more fleshing out that needs to be done. But I'm curious, or I'm wondering right now, is that work that needs to be done by the committee, or is that work that needs to be done by school leadership, or excuse me, some partnership between the two? So that's where I'm left wondering at this point in time. I think you've given us enough for the committee to, chew on for our next, couple of meetings. Hearing what you all just said, that gives us a few more days, because there was the other pieces. As a committee, we're definitely feeling the pinch, the time constraints to get these things done. And the big part I think we did address today, which was the recommendation for SRO. So now we know we have a dollar amount, and now we're working more diligently to continue to give you some of those other pieces. So for example, those pieces from Umoja were just kind of like a menu. I reached out to them and looked at some of the things they had to offer, and made a request, and they gave me you know, some of that. And I know that they offer more programming, but that was what they gave me based on what I, you know, asked for. And, you know, yeah, so I just wanted to just kind of put it out there. Like I'm processing the ask and thinking about some actionable things that can be done moving forward. So thank you all for the suggestions. Thank you for the opportunity for us to, as a committee, bring you, you know, this information. A lot of work has been done by a small handful of people with the impact, you know, with decisions that impact the entire school. So we didn't take this challenge lightly and took a lot of things into consideration.
Thanks, Mr. Mitchell. Yeah, so I think maybe even like Sarah could just sort of like draft up a list of like what's probably going to be in the minutes anyway, and give that to the committee to review. And that's probably like the best summing up step from this meeting. Yeah. And then I think, you know, we will have you back to present a revised plan at the next meeting. And so to the extent that we can have whatever you have done as much in advance of that as possible, that will be helpful. And yeah, there's definitely sort of a bigger context that needs to be attached to. So that is, you know, beyond what the whole school safety committee is really charged with.
If you want, we can have a checkpoint, maybe not a meeting, but between, you know, now and July 13th, you know, that's when your next meeting is. So maybe and I got to get a calendar. So maybe I won't propose a date. Maybe I'll put it in an email, but maybe in like 2 weeks, we'll say, hey, double check the folder. We've made updates to the template and, you know, give you guys kind of where we are. So like a progress report. And, you know, then you guys can go from there so that when July 13th rolls around, that'll definitely be our finalized, you know, efforts with all the details and things that you're looking for. And so it'll be what, you know, what you guys want CPS to approve.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to think of is like, what votes would we need to do to allocate funds or create buckets for positions and that stuff in July. And so that's sort of the level of detail that needs to be in there to make sense. So, yeah, so I think that is all I have for now. And we will look forward to getting some more from the committee. And thank you guys for all your work on this for sure. You know, it's definitely, I think it's, you know, especially like the student forum, I think was really a nice like outreach piece. And seeing the feedback from that has been really helpful as an LSC, especially for me. So, yeah, so I think Elaine, I don't know if you want to clarify. I think she means like if you guys have updated stuff, like we'll give you a list of what we are hoping to see based on the discussion of this meeting. And then you can probably, you know, give us the new plan, but also maybe a little summary. I think that's what Elaine means. Do you mean that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Cassie. So I know he mentioned that it will be in the folder and you can do that, but I think it's also helpful to see a summary of adjustments like we switched this from, you know, from this to this. So yes, that will be great to make sure that we're moving forward and we know what adjustments have been made so we don't have to rehash things that we're okay with.
Okay.
Okay, I think this item is done. I don't think we need to make a motion on this. And we don't have anyone else sign up for public participation, so that item is done. So I think we have concluded all our business. Probably this will be Denaya and Jose's last meetings. I know we said a little goodbye last time, but just want to say a second goodbye to you guys and a second thank you. And yeah, thank you for coming this close to the end of senior year. And I think that is it. Anyone have any final comments before we officially adjourn?
No, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all the LSM members, Mr. Mitchell, and yes, thank you.
I would say have a good summer, but I think we will see everyone sooner than that. Okay, I will adjourn 8:34. Have a good evening, everyone.